This episode of Rick and Rick is brought to you by Taskin, the first name in ultra-stylish, premium-quality travel gear, like the Taskin Air Duo dual-sided compression packing cubes. One side's 100% air breathable to keep clean clothes fresh and wrinkle-free. The other side's odor and water-resistant to keep dirty laundry sealed up tight. Now you can pack up to 40% more in the same space. Save 30% on your next purchase when you use the promo code R&R Take 30. That's R&R Take 30 at TaskinSF.com.
In the great hall of the Justice Gang, Rick and Rick join forces at the intersection of marketing, media, tech, and pop culture. Their mission, to review James Gunn's Superman for all mankind.
That's right. It's time to shout Great Caesar's Ghost and don't call me Chief.
Because Rick and Rick rule the box office and we're packing the Man of Steel.
With all the kaijus, T-spheres, metahumans, and monkey bot posters.
All the buzzsaw hands, hot girl squawks, and Mo Howard haircuts.
Plus all the small villain parents, super pooches, and cantankerous crypto cousins you can shake Gary the Robot's I-beam at.
And it all starts right here, right now, on the one show where everybody loves a good superhero, Rick, and everybody rules the world.
Holy Kryptonian cankersaurs, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of Rick and Rick Rule the Box Office with our official, very, very spoilerific review of James Gunn's Superman. I'm Rick Matheson, and I am joined, as always, by my good pal, Rick Root. Welcome to Superman Summer.
Thanks, man. I'm looking forward to this. This is a movie we've been talking about for a while.
Yes, in fact, I'm sure a huge relief over at DC Studios and Warner Brothers. They needed this one to be big. Just in case you've been hiding under kryptonite somewhere, this Superman stars David Corenswet as the Man of Steel, Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, Nathan Fillion as Green Lantern Guy Gardner, Bradley Cooper as Jor-El, and on and on and on. This is the latest reboot of the DC Comics movie franchise. This time, it's all under DC Studios, run by James Gunn and Peter Safran. Just to reiterate here, folks, if you have not seen the movie and don't want to be spoiled, come back to this episode later on. Just fair warning. I bet you have lots of questions here, Rick, but I want to open with a question for you. What were your expectations going into this movie?
To be honest with you, I didn't have a lot of expectations. I'm not really a big DC guy. I do have some Superman comics. I was a big fan of Henry Cavill, but I was interested to see how somebody else would play it, especially if it was kind of going back to being, more like the OG Superman from the movies. So I guess I'd have to say, if I summed it up, cautiously optimistic. I had seen a few things that got me worried. We talked about how the character looked a little funky, moving back and forth between Clark Kent and Superman, but surprisingly, that did not bother me at all during the movie.
This movie is unapologetically a comic book movie. There's no gritty, realism here. This is a comic book come to life. And if anything, Rick, what it is it's not just a DC comic book movie. It's a DC cartoon in live action.
No, that's a really good point.
If you watch any of the animated movies, this fits right in.
Yeah.
The movie is not afraid to be goofy. It's not worried about being hyper-realistic. You just kind of have to go with it. In terms of the plot, Lex Luthor is a billionaire tech bro who cannot stand that the world's attention has been taken off of him and is now firmly entranced with Superman. And so he wants to bring him down. There is Krypto the Superdog. There is Supergirl. Now, Krypto steals every scene that he's in. He is not a real dog. That is just a CGI creation. Sometimes, obviously. Sometimes his size changes. The scene where Clark is on his bed and Krypto climbs on top of him, the dog seemed extra large in that scene. Almost looked like a wolf.
Yeah. I noticed that too. In some scenes, it seemed like it was about 20, 25 pound dog. And other scenes, it seemed like it was more like a 45 pound dog. It was really interesting to see it kind of switch sizes. But I'm glad you mentioned this because I think there are a couple of characters that kind of surfaced in this movie that stole a lot of the scenes they were in. And one of them by far was the dog. Krypto was such a heartwarming character for them to add to it. And in fact, one of our listeners, a longtime friend, Aaron, mentioned this in a Facebook post. He's like, yeah, Krypto steals the show as expected and as he should.
What I found more entertaining than I thought was this whole Justice Gang. Now, that is not something that exists in the comics, but here is an early incarnation of what would eventually become the Justice League. This team is Green Lantern, Girl and Mr. Terrific. These are side characters in this, but you see that this is a world where people are used to seeing superheroes and supervillains, so anything's possible. In fact, I would hate to live in this world because it's like at one point the city is breaking in half, and at the Daily Planet, they're like, another day, another disaster in Metropolis.
Totally.
Now, a couple of interesting things here, Rick. There's positivity to this movie. All the characters sort of rise to the challenge and people rally around Superman. James Gunn wasn't always known for being super positive early in his career. And not that long ago, he produced, and I believe his brother wrote, that evil Superman movie you went to see called Blackburn.
Yeah.
And so that was a story of what if there was a Kal-El-like character who arrives on Earth that has all these exact powers, and he's a little shit. This is not that movie for sure. This is sort of like night and day here. I like the characters here. I felt like David Cornsweet, he pretty much nailed Clark Kent and Superman. If I had any sort of criticism, I don't know if it's him or the writing or both, but Clark and Lois are contemporaries. They're the same part of their careers. And she seems fully formed and he seems very young, very naive. And she is a little bit more of a realist. What I liked about it was that Lois is just as much of a hero as Clark is. She doesn't have any superpowers, doesn't wear a mask, doesn't wear a cape, but look who throws herself into danger without even hesitation. In the pursuit of the story, she's ambitious, but also, hell, if Clark's in trouble, she's going to go bring the posse together to, save him. And that's very true to the character. If there's a criticism on that, I think she was a little underwritten because typically the character's a little bit more sarcastic in a fun way, and she teases Clark. Did she ever call him Smallville in this?
Oh, I didn't. If she did, I didn't pick up on that.
That is a typical thing that she's always called Clark. Then we look at Lex. What I didn't like in this movie was his scheme yet again in these movies is a real estate deal, essentially. He wants half of this country that he's set up this war scenario in to get the oil rights. It seems to be a recurring theme in the movies, and I would have liked to have seen something more original, and I would have liked to have seen Brainiac or one of the other big villains. A couple strange things, though. Gary and the robots in the Fortress of Solitude, it was a little odd that they never called him Kal-El. Yeah. It seems like they would have been able to tell him what the rest of Jor-El's message was, or that he was sent to Earth, perhaps beyond the fact that Krypton was exploding. So that was a little off. And likewise, his snotty cousin, Kara, she was the age we see her in the movie when Krypton exploded. So she was Kal-El's older cousin. She was a teenager when Krypton exploded. They were both sent off into space, just that Kal-El made it to Earth as a baby and grew up and became Earth's champion. And she arrived as a teenager. And so that created some tension between the characters. Technically, Krypto in the current mythology is her dog, not Clark's. In fact, I think he says at one point it's kind of a foster situation just because she's irresponsible. And so he's watching the dog. But it seemed like Kara would have said, oh, yeah, we were sent to take over the planet and subjugate the population. It's unclear why she wouldn't have known their purpose for being there. For me, the litmus test for good Superman stories. Does Pa Kent say something that gets you choked up? That's got to be there. And does Clark get his ass kicked again and again and again? Now, what makes him a hero, one, is his heart and his intentions. But two, it's not that he's superpowered. It's that he keeps on going when any sane person would stay down, and usually he outwits the villain.
That plays well into how Lex Luthor was involved in how Superman was getting his butt kicked, right? And once that factor was taken out and it was, pure wits between Superman and his, counterpart, then, he used those wits to win.
Yes. So Pa Kent's got to say something that gets you choked up. Clark's got to persevere after getting his ass kicked. And you got to leave the movie feeling great. I feel like the movie did that. It took a little bit for me to get into the movie, but once I was in, I was firmly in. When we get back from this short break, what to make of Ma and Pa Kent? What's up with that Green Lantern haircut? Plus, has Superman gone woke? Stay tuned. Hey, Rick and Rick Nation, don't forget to check out our website at rickandrick.com. It's double the Rick in just one click at rickandrick.com. And welcome back to Rick and Rick Rule the World with Rick Matheson and Rick Wooten as we continue our official review of James Gunn's Superman. Now, lots of stories around the movie. Maybe we'll hit the controversies around the movies first, which I guess was all predictable. I don't know. It's just we seem to have these dumb stories with folks saying that Superman's become woke or whatever. And I was like, hey, are you completely unfamiliar with the character? He's been this way since 1938, newsflash. But I did enjoy the memes because there were memes like, Superman didn't get woke. You just grew up to be a shitty person. He's an illegal alien who champions the oppressed. Issue 1 of Action Comics, 1938. His first takedown is a corrupt politician. He's watching a politician who's trying to hide from these reporters, and he says, I'm like, any politician who doesn't like reporters can't be up to any good. On and on through the years. The Superman, I want to say, radio show actually helped bring down the KKK in the 1940s. They had an episode or a series of episodes that had all the code words and stuff that actually ended up educating the public about what to look for and all these things, and helped bring down the KKK.
Oh, interesting.
He's always been, quote unquote, woke. It would be weird if he was anything but. So it's one of those things where you just, roll your eyes and go, okay, whatever. Just watch the movie, dude.
Yeah, I think that's more just a reflection of how sensitive our culture is at the moment. I mean, he's just a good guy. He's always been just a good guy. And, several of the superheroes have had, been in service to people, right? I mean, they're on the DC side, of course, is him, but on the Marvel side, you also had Captain America and even Spider-Man. So I don't know. I think it's kind of funny, and sometimes I wonder if people are just trying to create controversy for no reason.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it is, but it's something that the movie has fun with because Lex Luthor has a propaganda machine. He has these monkeys that are spreading negative stories in social media about Superman.
Right.
And Superman says, acts as doesn't bother me, but then mentions that there's a hashtag super shit or something. You can tell that really bugs him. It was kind of a funny commentary.
I wasn't a big fan of the Green Lantern. I was actually going to ask you about this was he supposed to be this weird? Was he supposed to be this obnoxious? And as much as I love Nathan Fillion, I just wasn't a big fan of this character.
No, I hate the character. I've never liked the character. That stupid Mo Howard haircut. He was even more obnoxious in the comics. Here, they try to show that, there's something underneath there. He's tough on the exterior, but, he's got a heart under it all. I just don't like the character. In one scene, there is a television reporter, and it's actually Christopher Reeve's son, William.
Oh, cool.
What'd you think about Ma and Pa Kent back in Smallville?
I on one hand, and I put this in my notes, on one hand, one of the things I really liked about this movie is that there were some real people. There were a number of times where, the people just were very relatable. They were very down to earth. And certainly Ma and Pa Kent were one of those. However, I like the interpretations better that I've seen in the past where, he's where they're more intelligent, where they're, a little more on top of things. And in this particular case, they just made it feel kind of ditzy.
Yeah. And that was my reaction as well. Really, when you think about it, James Gunn was essentially saying, you see the surface and you think something about these people, but underneath it, these are wise people who are fundamentally good people. And that's where you see, when Pa Kent starts to talk, you're like, his voice is kind of weird, whatever. But then as he collects his thoughts and talks to Clark about, just because, you've learned that your parents sent you here to take over the planet doesn't mean anything. It's what you choose to do. And everything that you've chosen to do has made me so proud. And that's, where I was like, yep, that's a Pa Kent line right there. And when I look back and think of Kevin Costner as Pa Kent, I think that's probably more of a prototypical, or John Snyder from Smallville, probably, a better, version for sure. But I came away liking this iteration more than I thought I was in the first moments that we see them in the movie, for sure.
Yeah. Look, I didn't hate it at all. I just thought that they could have done a better job at making them. They didn't have to be the smartest people in the movie, but make them a little bit more wise, a little more, because at the end of the day, where Clark got his values was from them.
Exactly.
And so I wanted to see that that same kind of, intelligence and kindness. And, we definitely got the kindness, but, the intelligence and stuff like that didn't come through.
Yeah. No, I would agree there. It was one direction to go in. It's one of those things where it's like James Gunn, you think about it, he's got to do his own thing, right? Because everyone's going to be comparing this to whatever's come before it. Truthfully, I feel like some of the story was a little too close to Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. I mean, the whole thing going into another country, being set up, and, for Lex Luthor playing you, pretty much in that movie as well. There are scenes in that movie where people are yelling at him, and screaming at him. And then there's that in this movie as well. Harkening back, maybe it was a callback. The whole Lex Luthor real estate plot is like the first Superman movie. So like I said, I would have loved to have seen a movie with Brainiac, something totally different. Or, Lobo. I guess Lobo, Jason Momoa's Lobo, will be the villain in Supergirl next year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, perfect casting. That was always like, duh.
100%.
And then Mr. Terrific was terrific. I mean, lived up to his name. It's like I was joking about how in Fantastic Four, it's like, I think I shall call myself Mr. Fantastic. Well, here it's, I'm going to be Mr. Terrific,
It's true. It's true. Hey, by the way, this is the other character that I felt like every scene he was in, he stole the show.
Totally.
This was a fantastic, terrific character.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of fun watching him. I could definitely see a movie, spin off just with him.
On the other side of this break, the Ricks give their final grades for James Gunn's Superman.
This episode of Rick and Rick is brought to you by Taskin, the first name in ultra-stylish, premium quality travel gear, like the Taskin Air Duo dual-sided compression packing cubes. One side's 100% air breathable to keep clean clothes fresh and wrinkle-free. The other side's odor and water-resistant to keep dirty laundry sealed up tight. Now you can pack up to 40% more in the same space. Save 30% on your next purchase when you use the promo code R&R Take 30. That's R&R Take 30. At TaskinSF.com.
And welcome back to Rick and Rick Rule the World as the Ricks give their final grades for James Gunn's Superman.
Well, let me give you some of my highs and lows. On one hand, I have to say I was impressed with a lot of the movie, and I didn't have a lot of expectations going in, like good or bad. So, I just enjoyed it. I really liked how, and Chris Gunn does this, how there's an emotional element to it. And, there's a nice, tugging at the heartstrings. They had the dog in there, which to me kind of reminds me of the Ewoks in Star Wars. You got to have the cuddly thing in there. I liked how relatable it was, how all the characters were with the people who were not superheroes were really relatable. And, like you talked about, Ma and Pa, just very normal people. I've got relatives like that. I can picture it. And, and I think that David Cornsweet's performance was actually pretty good. And I was worried when I saw the ad. So on the positive side, I thought, that stuff was awesome. I do have to say the Lex Luthor thing was a little bit weird. I thought I get it. I think he kind of played the character right, but I thought it was a little clumsy at times and not believable. I couldn't suspend disbelief a couple of times. And so I was like, that's a little weird. One of the things I loved about this movie is that, and we've talked about this before, is I've always felt like the animated movies were much better than the live action. This is the first one where I think this live action movie was on par with the animated ones. And I felt like, you mentioned it earlier, where it just captured some of that essence, and it was a fun ride all the way through. And so overall, I have to say I was pretty impressed. And, if I was to give it a grade, I would give it a B+.
Yeah. My wife, she asked me literally as we were walking out the theater, what's your grade? And I said, I would give it a B. But what was weird was, as I thought about it, it's like, well, wait a second. For how I feel, this last good half hour of the movie just gets you going. I mean, our audience, they applauded at the end. And, when my wife's applauding, at a Superman movie, she could care less about superheroes and Superman. People were into it. It's just a great message, great story, and that kind of things. I don't know, I still feel like it's a B movie, but overall, in terms of experience, I probably would go to that B+. Well, that's going to have to wrap it up for this episode of Rick and Rick Rule the World. Until next time, keep on kicking ass and keep on coming back to the one show where everybody's name is Rick.
And everybody rules the world.